Welcome to another episode of Mystic-Skeptic Radio. On today's show, our guest is Ed Wilson, a UFO researcher. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you get involved with this?
Good morning, David. It's a pleasure to be here. I wish everybody could call in with answers because there's a lot of things to go over, but I'm really pleased to get a chance to share with you guys some really exciting news in UFOs. Originally, David, I started out as a rare book and document dealer, and I would go to auctions all over the country, and I would make purchases of rare historical documents and rare books, and then I would sell them to major auction houses throughout the world. That was my career. And what happened about 3 years ago, and I've been on this project for about 3 years now, is I went to an auction up near Cleveland, near Lewis Field, which is now the Lewis Space Center. It was a little auction house, and it was advertised as the Space Collection of Emily Earl, ERTYL. Well, they had that part right. Emily Earl was the first female employee at NASA at Cape Canaveral. And it really wasn't just her collection. It was actually her longtime life mate, Scott Simpkinson, who was the very first lead engineer on the Space Task Group in 1958, when the United States decided to catch up with the first Russian space launches. I went there and I purchased 31 black 3-ring binders, 3 inches deep, and they comprised approximately 568 original NASA photos. There was one binder of photos and documents and reports for each of the missions in Mercury, in Gemini, and Apollo. And my goodness gracious, it was a wonderful collection. I was born during the space age in 1955, so I was 4 years old when they started the Space Task Group to catch up with the Russian flights. And by the time men landed on the moon, I was, I would have been 14. So all this stuff is everything that I grew up being excited about. So I was pleased to get the collection. I paid a pretty penny for it. But what I didn't know was that inside the Gemini XI binder, right at the rear end of the binder, was a lithograph, and it was about 6 inches by 9 inches. And that lithograph, let me read it exactly what it says. It says at the top of the image and at the bottom of the image, unclassified. I would learn later that unclassified means that it was taken from restriction by the National Photographic Interpretive Center so that they could put it into a form that could not be back engineered. What it shows is it shows the curvature of the Earth with an interesting cloud pattern underneath it. It shows the stars and the skies in the background. But the most amazing thing that you will see, and if you just go to Amazon.com, you can see all the pictures I'll try to describe to you, is a very clear, not dim, but a very clear image of a lenticular UFO. There's no other explanation for it. It is a UFO like you would imagine a UFO would look like. And as well as that, it is surrounded by a glowing aura, which this was taken in 1966 during the Gemini XI mission. And they weren't even talking about glowing auras back then. It will turn out, as I'll explain to you guys later, that what this is, and it's a lithograph, not a photograph, it's a CIA briefing document. The purpose of the CIA briefing documents, and they were created by the National Photographic Interpretive Center, was that many of the photographs taken, originally started out during the war, but taken by reconnaissance satellites, by spies, etc., would contain very specific information in the photograph. And if you guys are familiar out there with Mick West is actually one of the greatest photo interpreters. I can imagine. If you haven't had a chance to check one of his YouTube videos where he's actually tearing apart a UFO claim, he's amazing. He's very skilled and talented, and he's the exact explanation why they had to make lithographs to keep items from being back engineered. Mick West can take an actual photograph, and through all the magic of his skill and talent, he can tear that thing apart. He can tell you what angle it was taken at. He can tell you the photo lens that was used upon it. He can tell you the range. He can tell you the speed and the momentum of all these things. And he can do that because a photograph contains highly detailed back information. But what the NPIC did was they would take these high definition photographs and they would make a lithograph of it. Now, a halftone lithograph is a dot matrix picture, okay? And the purpose of it is you can see the general information portrayed and the human eye can analyze it, but when it comes to back engineering, it's nearly useless. For instance, back during the 1960s, when I was a young boy, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis where the U-2 plane flew over Cuba and it took a picture of the Russian missile silos being installed on the island of Cuba, and we nearly went to nuclear war over that, kids. It was very trying times back then. We really were on the edge of nuclear war for a number of years. But what was important, and what I recall, is that President Kennedy at that time had to get onto television, old black and white television, and explain to the nation exactly why he was putting an embargo on Cuba and turning back the Russian ships that were bringing missiles and equipment to Cuba. And of course, the Cuban Missile Crisis nearly ended up with thermonuclear war. And what he held up on TV was U-2 spy photographs, but he didn't hold up photographs, he held up lithographs. Why? Because if he had held photographs up, the Russians would have been able to back engineer the exact specifications of how high the U-2 was flying, what kind of camera was being used, the film sensitivity, all the things that a skilled photo interpreter can glean from a photograph. He didn't hold that up. He held up a lithograph. And that's exactly what a CIA sanitized briefing document is. And that's what this is that was in the back of Scott Simpkinson's binder. Now, basically, I've written 3 books, and I'm sure that you will hear the titles of them. David, I'm sure you will be able to provide them with some information. The first one of the 3 books I wrote 3 years ago was an investigation into the rudimentary exploration of what that object was. I knew it was a halftone lithograph because I make my living being able to distinguish real art pieces and real documents from lithographs. But I could not figure out, because nobody knew, why anyone would make a lithograph like that. Now, one of the first things that I discovered was that back then, during the Gemini XI mission in 1966, they made several documents at NASA, and these are all available online. Everything I'm telling you and everything in the books is not me. It's not a story. It's not hearsay. Everything you're going to hear here is documents that you can actually get online for free. Look them up yourself and see them. But of course, the books will negate you needing to do that. But you're going to be able to find out that this is not anything I've determined or I've heard from someone. These are all documents. Now, let's see, where was I? That's the first volume. The first place I went to Leslie Keene. There we go. Hi, David. I can see you. We've got some video now. The first place I went was to some journalists to try and help me solve the mystery of what this lithograph was. And I don't know if David's got this. I can see you. Can you see that, David?
Can you show us a few images, if possible, for our
Yes. Can you
YouTube
see it? I'm
audience?
holding it up to my camera. I can see you. Can you see me? The image? Can you
You
see
need
my
to turn
face?
on your camera.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Oh, wait a minute. There's an okay. Let's see if I can get this old.
So for
There we
those
go.
not familiar with the term lenticular, is that like a cloud?
Lenticular means like a lenticular, a seed shape. It's basically, uh, well, yeah, a lentil. Well, a lentil's kind of cup shape. I don't have lentils to eat very often. Um, most it's like a dandelion seed. It's that shape. Lenticular means, and well, it's a saucer shape. If you take two saucers, put a saucer on top and the saucer on bottom, it's equal distance and equal shape. How come I can't figure out where the camera is? View profile, mute my audio, start video. Well, record. I don't see a camera button, Dave. Now I've lost everything. Can you still hear me, Dave?
I can hear you, but the buttons in the bottom on your left next to the audio.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have that particular screen. Um,
Okay, well, let me tell the audience how to get a hold of your book so they can see the images.
yeah.
So the book is called.
Well, that's it. Let me just put this out there. All three books are available on Amazon, and you go to the book department. And the best way for you to get to see the pictures, you don't have to buy the books. I made um, particular. I paid. Wait a minute. There's a sign in button. There we go. Now you're coming on. Do I want to allow? That's okay. Oh Lord.
I think this is important conversation because just to give you a little bit of background, Mr. Wilson, I
Yes.
am a UFO skeptic, even though I've seen
Sure.
two UFOs in my lifetime. When
Wonderful.
I grew up in Mexico, after a hurricane, we saw triangular lights in the formation, kind of scouting the area. And then when I lived in a different area of Mexico, I saw um, a circular cylinder. It wasn't a cylinder. It was like an orb. It was like a metal orb close to a mountain, and it was spinning, and it was like flashing lights of different colors. And there's been multiple videos on TikTok and other um, websites where they show the different kinds. So there's two kinds that I've seen out of like the 10 to 16 different kinds. And I still feel that it was either a government experiment, optical illusion, or our mind playing tricks on us. So it's when you contacted me, and now that I've seen the pictures, I want more evidence, and I also want to ask you some hard questions regarding
Wonderful.
where is all this evidence going? So you were saying that you spoke to some reporters after you found the lithograph. What did the reporters tell you?
Well, Leslie Keene was the first person to respond to me. And of course, Leslie's the one who brought up the revelation in 2017 when the New York Times, where they came up with the gimbal video. Leslie was the one who broke that story. And she also broke the Lou Elizondo story. She worked with me and helped me find my way into doing research for myself. Of course, she has lots of projects going on, but she guided me to some of the particular things that are very important. Number one, as I was starting to say, the evidence that I started with the mission report. The mission report for every mission was secret for 12 years. You can download it now. You go to Johnson Space Center and go to Johnson Space Center, look up mission report Gemini 11, and you'll download. It's basically a 350-page report on the entire mission. There were 13 experiments that were done there, and they have all the data that was accumulated in there, the reports, the successes, the failures, and all the purposes of the missions and the equipment used on it. And from there, that's where I started. As I said, that report was created in October of 66. The mission was in September of 66. And it was secret for 12 years, okay? So no one could look at it until 1978. In that report, on page 4 of that report, you will see, I think I sent you a picture, so you might be able to see it. It's the comparative picture on the face of the third book, and what it shows is it shows the NASA photo. And here's the other thing. You can look at every one of the NASA photos from all three of those series of missions, the Mercury, the Gemini, and the Apollo, by going to Arizona State University March to the Moon. Just type in on your Google ASU March to the Moon. That website has all the mission photographs from every kind of camera, the Hasselblad and the Maurer cameras for all three of those missions. You can zoom in on them, and you can see the complete catalog of what NASA has available in those missions. The one picture that was important is I recognized after scouring all the records and all the photographs, I recognized that this picture with the cloud formation that I hope you can show, it's on the book, the Simpkinson NASA UFO, the CI sanitized briefing document they never intended you to see. On the front cover of it, you see the actual picture S66545585. That is the NASA catalog number that you can see on the cover of the book. What it is, the large square rectangle, that's the actual photo that they have online at Arizona State University. What you see inside it and down and in darker black is a subsequent smaller set of the picture that was cut out of it, okay? And that shows the mission report image that's on page 4 of the mission report. And those mission report photographs, you will also notice that the same format where it says unclassified and it's a 6x9-inch image, that is the exact same photograph for every image in the mission report. Not only is it the exact same image, but you can check and find that the NASA script is the exact same script that was used on the mission report is on the lithograph itself. Now, we're back to the book, S66545585. Then you have the mission report in the big inset down on the lower left corner. And if you look to the right, a direct overlay, you will see the lithograph with the UFO. And it only takes up about 5% of the entire image. That lithograph, if you notice the cloud structure on all three of those images, that is an overlay, okay? It's not anything computer generation. It's the actual overlay of each one of those images. And they match the NASA published photo, not, not generally. They match it not close, they match it exactly. And that is beyond coincidence. It's just a simple overlay. There's no manipulation. That shows that it is highly, highly improbable that that was not the original photograph where the lithograph with this flying saucer can be seen. Now, that's just one of the things that we've done here. Like I said, that was the mission report, and that's where I found the image of the page 4, and that's where you match all those things. But the next place I went was another report that you can find online, and it's the actual voice transcripts of the entire 3-day mission. And in those voice transcripts, you will find those highlighted also in the very first book, which is the Simpkinson NASA Archive UFO with over 150 of the earliest NASA photos, many of them once secret. This was the personal archive of the man who started the NASA space program. In fact, on the back cover, and David, you'll be able to bring this up in some of the photos I sent you, you will see a group of engineers with a young female right in the center, and in the background behind them, they're all clustered around the very first Mercury capsule ever built. That is the Space Task Group from 1959. And the girl in the center is Emily Ertl, who the auction was held by. And she, inside, you'll find a record of her being the first female NASA employee at Cape Canaveral. And she's nestled into Scott Simpkinson, the engineer who was the lead engineer of the Space Task Group that built that capsule and worked on building the control rooms and worked on building all of the modern launch facilities that they had. And he worked all the way up until his death in 1996. So Scott Simpkinson and his first spacecraft and Emily Ertl are on the back of that cover. On the inside, along with the 150 of the finest available photos from that era. In fact, this is exciting. This is how good these photos are and how rare they are. Of those 546 photos that I got, I sold 232 of them at Heritage Auctions in March of 2024 for $80,000. The photographs you find in this book are probably the finest group of photographs ever, because Emily was the secretary who put this all together for NASA. And this was before they had computers. This was before you could do anything other than a photographer. We didn't even have faxing back then yet. And what I got now, and what I described to you was the mission report. And now here's the other report that you can find. It's called Ground, Gemini 11 Voice Communications Air to Ground.
Ed, can I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
So what if this was like a game that some of the astronauts and her were playing, where somebody went in and drew this image and they added it to the lithograph? Because a lithograph is an ink drawing based on an image. So they took a photograph and they added this shape and they put it in there, and it was like a gag that they were doing. How are you able to verify if it's coming from an original source or not?
That's a great question. And those are exactly the kind of questions that I tried to find answers to. And I did find some of the answers to them. First of all, if you look on the covers of the air transcripts, and if you look on the cover of the Gemini mission report, and if you look on the cover of the Gemini 11 debriefing, they all have the same classification mode that you see here. And right on the cover, it explains that any use of any of those images would result in prison sentences. Okay, so this is the exact same image structure that was secret for 12 years, and those documents express that you will be imprisoned if you violate that. But that's not all, okay? That's just the first thing to bring up to you. The second thing is I had 5 scientists analyze the document. Number one, I went to Microtrace Incorporated, Chicago, Illinois, which is one of the finest forensic paper examiners in the world. It does work for Scotland Yard, amongst other organizations, and multi-million-dollar lawsuits. I spent $5,000 back when $5,000 would be about $10,000 today, and I sent them the original lithograph, and they did a 80-page scientific analysis, which is in the back in full in the first book. All 80 pages of their scientific analysis, unfiltered. The other 4 scientists, they all did reports. Their reports are all in the back there too. Nothing has been tampered with. It's all there for you to see the analysis that was done. And they said unequivocally that this is consistent with a 1966 halftone lithograph of the period. So that's just the first thing that I did there. The second thing, of course, was not just that, but the addition of the research finding out how there could possibly be an image like that that was created and we would have no record of it. And that's where I got into the CIA documents and the National Reconnaissance Office documents going back as far as 1957 to the creation of the National Photographic Interpretive Center. And right in those records, it starts out with the 2 volumes of CIA documents called HT Automat. HT Automat stood for High Speed Target Automation. And the purpose of the NPIC was to take photographic evidence of battlefield situations and quickly turn them in to briefing documents for the president, for the generals, for anyone who needed that targeting information, and it had to be done at speed. This was created for a specific reason, okay? You have to understand what we were like. Back in 1957, when they created it, the reason they created it was this. During the time that I was born, nuclear war was done by means of huge lumbering aircraft. It would take 7 or 8 hours to get from the Soviet Union to perhaps one of our main European targets, or who knows how many hours to go across the polar region into the United States. But this was slow, lumbering warcraft, okay? We would send up fighters, and you would have fighters to defend yourself against them. In 1957, kids, the world changed for us, and it was a dramatic change. We had nuclear bombs, we had hydrogen bombs, but the Soviet Union in 1957 developed, launched, and tested the first ICBM missile. Now, let's take a look at what happened when that occurred and the United States was caught off guard. All of a sudden, no longer did you have hours to send up aircraft and fighters to shoot the bombers down. No longer did you have a warning period to mobilize yourself in cities for air raids. No longer did we have the luxury of time. In 1957, with the R-7 Soviet Union ICBM, the world changed, and we no longer had hours. We had minutes. And that's when all this secrecy was developed. It was not developed to hide UFOs. What it was developed for was for us to survive. So the secrecy was a method of keeping our secrets away for the purposes of warfare. So the HT Automat had the records of the exact lithograph machine that was used to make this lithograph. Okay.
Ed, I have another question.
Sure.
If I was the president at that time or a high official and saw that there was a spacecraft hovering over the Earth, I would go on panic mode and I would have maybe similar to what you're saying, that we started building rockets and nuclear bombs to be able to protect ourselves. But it seems like the protection came from other countries. It didn't come from outer space. I know that Reagan had what they
Yeah,
call
you're exactly right. No,
Star Wars.
yeah, no, that's what the whole secrecy apparatus that you will see the documents. I've got dozens of documents explaining it. It was created to protect from other countries, but the UFOs were incidental and got caught up in that apparatus. So you're absolutely right. That's exactly what happened. So this apparatus of secrecy had nothing to do with UFOs. It just so happened that UFOs were captured in the images and they were entered into this secret pipeline, and from that pipeline, they have never escaped. So yes, that's a very valid point, and that's exactly what happened.
Okay, so what about other sightings and other myths that we have, like one of the UFOs crashing in Area 51, the many people who feel that they've been abducted. Um, do you stay just with the facts based on evidence, or do you go further? And we had a guy from MUFON who thought they were demonic entities. Do you speculate, or you just stay close to the evidence you've been able to find?
Well, that's a great question. Of course, I'm interested in all those things, and I've had to comment on them in various media productions. And the truth of the matter is, those things are outside of my purview. Believe me, I am not an advocate for or against. I'm a historian, and what I have in these books are the historic documents that pertain only to this incident, but it also covers all the reasons why the government secrecy is found. Here, first of all, let me ask you, have you ever heard NASA in an interview in front of the House committee say, we have no images of UFOs in our NASA photos? Have you ever heard that?
No,
Because
and lately we hear different presentations before Congress and places saying that there is all kinds of UAP things, but to
no, no,
me,
no. You've never heard that from NASA. No, you have not heard that from NASA.
okay, I
NASA
know,
has,
but
yeah,
can
their
I
test
finish?
man. Now, here's the point I'm making. Don't
What I wanted to say
misunderstand me.
is that whenever the government or the media start reporting on UFOs, is usually when there's something else going on, and people are either bored or they're trying to distract you from some other sneaky thing they're doing. So for a lot of us, it seems that it is a fabricated phenomenon to keep people ignorant of the real things that the governments are doing, which are usually not good for the populace.
That's a wonderful hypothesis. Many people look at that, and there's a lot of things that you can say about that. Number one, there are a lot of documents that say the exact opposite, and these are government documents that state particularly things like what's the name of the report? The Conley Report in 1967. The government, there are actual documents there, and you can see some of them in my book, where they specifically state that we do not want the public to believe in UFOs. Okay, we have got to tamp this down because it will definitely interfere with any of um, our air defenses and reports that we'll need if we ever do have a nuclear war. In other words, the sighting of UFOs would clog the phone lines with people wanting to understand what it is when they're trying to fight a war and they need those lines. Also, those documents are extensive. There was a cover up. They called them tin hat people. You would be accused if you believed in UFOs who wearing a tin hat, of wearing aluminum foil over your head to keep your brain from being read by the aliens. Those were propagated by the government to deny exactly what you're saying. No, it was exactly that. UFOs were ridiculed. The Conley Report, that's what I was saying. The Conley Report. Project Blue Book was specifically designed to um, say that anyone who believed that stuff was mentally off. Okay. So it's the exact opposite if you follow the document trail. The actual documents say that the proposal um, that they were using that and only bringing it up to dissuade from other things is absolutely invalidated by the actual document trail. But again, let me get back to the documents here because that's what I'm talking about. And I'm only talking about, it's nice to talk about the other incidences. Certainly, I have opinions on them, but that's not what I'm doing here. What I'm trying to provide is the documentation about once you see the images of this book and what was found, and once you read the train of document after document and citation after citation of how things actually worked back then, and let the evidence speak for itself. I'm not going to make the evidence. Don't believe me. I don't believe other people. Okay. All I'm asking you to do is read the documents and let the documents speak for themselves. As I was saying now, there's all kinds of other verifications. I went to the voice transcripts. In the voice transcripts, I read all 3 days worth of voice transcripts because, like you, I said, well, if I was an astronaut and I saw that UFO out the window, I certainly wouldn't be able to keep quiet on the radio. And guess what? Um, they didn't. Okay. When you read the Gemini 11 voice transcripts, I have them right in the book. And remember, these transcripts were a secret for 12 years. So nobody read these for 12 years. But here's some of the things that went on. Now, there were all kinds of sightings of strange objects. And also in the back of my newest book, you will see the National Reconnaissance Office memo. I have the document saying from the National Reconnaissance Office, Brockway McMillan, the very first director of the National Reconnaissance Office, speaking to the head of NASA at Washington, D.C., talking about astronauts sighting things out the window and speaking about them. And he says, we understand that they have to mention on the radio what they're seeing out the window. But, and this was his but we want to brief them that they are not to give any great descriptions, any great details of what they're seeing. And of course, his justification was because we have secret satellites up there. And if they happen to describe one of our satellites, it could be a serious international incident.
Okay, so Ed, I have a question. So is that why they stopped trying to go to the moon? Like it seemed very abrupt to a lot of us that they had sent a few rockets to the moon and they had been exploring and then suddenly they stopped. Do you think they're afraid of these entities or
No. These things are like budgetary constraints. Okay, there was no I lived during that time and was eligible for the draft for the Vietnam War. At the time these things were going on, we were suffering from a policy during the Johnson administration of guns and butter. That's when we landed men on the moon. The extravagant cost of these programs were amazing. Okay, and eventually, after the novelty wore off after Apollo 17, the novelty had worn off and people weren't even watching the launches on television anymore. And they were incredibly expensive. And we were, as we are now, and always fighting with Congress, we were broke. Okay. We had the Vietnam War that we did on credit. We had the space program that we did on credit. Just like we are now, the guys can't make a budget and stick to it. So it's always a constant battle between bankruptcy and solvency. And
but if
that's
I
why
was
it was stopped.
Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos and I knew about this, uh, or NASA officials knew about it, wouldn't you be scared to send a rocket into space that you might crash into something like this, or you might disrupt them from whatever they're doing, being vigilant over our activities? Wouldn't you not want to break out into the unknown where there could be all kinds of, just like if troops go into an area they're not supposed to go to, you can start a world war. Wouldn't it be scared to start a galactic war by delving into their territory?
That's an interesting hypothesis, David. But I beg to differ just on the basis of what I know of human nature. From what I know of human nature, we never back down from a challenge. We go head first into wars every day of our lives. We've been doing it ever since the creation of the human race. But more importantly than that, let's see, what was the point you were making? Is you were saying that if you were NASA and knew that, that's why I need to get into all three of these books. I'm just going to go straight to book 3 and what we know right now. Okay, that's in book 3. This is 3 years of research. The first book, I went through the transcripts, and well, let me since I'm turned to the page, let me just tell you right now. So here's what you read. This are the actual voice transcripts, and this is only one of about 5 incidences. It happened at 54 hours, 44 minutes, and 1 second. And you have the command pilot saying, oh, well, let me back up one page here. Here we go. 54 hours, 39 minutes, 42 seconds. Commander, something go by your window out there? Co-pilot, yes, correct. And then there's a blank, and one with three dots. They don't read it. It says, let's turn around and go the other way, says the co-pilot. Now I am, breaks up. Yes, it's pitching over the top just like there's too much in rate commanding. Gemini 11, Hawaii, go ahead. All right, will you give us a reading on stack 2 Charlie, please? Roger, 2 Charlie is down at the bottom. Roger, it's at 0 amps, 0 volts. Hawaii, say again. Gemini 11, Hawaii, might as well turn it off. Roger, go along with it. Hawaii, Gemini 11, go ahead. We plan to stay in mode until we get to D15. Okay, they must have shorted out because we never saw it. They go away. We're going to go ahead and power down a computer. Okay, we confirm you're powered down. We went away to pre-launch here. Hello, Hawaii. How's the D15 equipment looking? Okay. We show your recorder monitor is operating normally. Say it again. We show the recorder monitor operating normally. Roger. That was the same. Then, at that moment, they knew what to do. They turned the tape recorder off. The transmission was stopped for 6 minutes. For 6 whole minutes, the tape recorder's off. And then when they come back on, they say, yes, the D15. Is the recorder on? Yes. That's just one of the instances. Here was one on this D15 experience. Oh, there's something real shiny right there. Yes. Whatever it is, it's something moving straight down the scope on our left. A real bright spot, but identified as a cloud, but flashing light possibly. Cloud cover still going by. I could not see it. Kind of weird. Kind of weird. What did you say? Kind of weird. Yes, I can't see it. That's for sure. These are just some of the voice transcripts that went on. They helped me pinpoint the time. The time was right at the D15 experiment, right when they took the photograph S66-54585. It was just before and during the D15 experiment. What the stack 5C that they were talking about that went to 0 amps and 0 volts is the battery. And most people are familiar with the electromagnetic effect that UFOs seem to have on equipment. And I'm sure you've heard of lots of instances where a UFO will fly over a car and the car battery will die, right? I'm sure that's a well-known phenomenon. It seems to occur a lot of times during all UFO encounters. What happens here is they saw something fly by their window. The co-pilot said, yes, I saw it. Let's turn around and look at it. And before they can do anything, the battery goes dead and mission control says, read your battery. So that's an electromagnetic UFO effect right at that instant. Then within 1 minute of that, they go dead for 6 minutes. So these are the kind of phenomena that I found in the voice transcript. The interesting thing is on the D15 experiment too, is I went to another secret for 12-year memorandum, and that one is the debriefing. And during the debriefing, they talk about the D15 experiment, which was the first television recorder in space, and which I got in 16,000 frames of film with images of these UFOs on the frames from the National Archives. They're on the website. You can see that they're in the book. There's an entire analysis about it. I sent you some pictures of them too. But during that debriefing, they specifically questioned the astronauts about the D15 experiment, which went relatively well. It was the first television monitor used for tracking, and what we're talking about is tracking military targets. And they had a little button on it, and every time that he saw something through the TV camera, he would electromagnetically record it. He was told only when something interesting happens by pushing a button on his lap. And he recorded something, and he recorded 16,000 frames actually. But they ask him in the debriefing, and you can read this. All these things are documented, and I have the actual documents. I don't just have the script. You can look at the official documents in these books and read them. He says, well, I told you guys before, I only took I only took images when I thought there was something worth taking an image of. And he says, and there were no anomalies except for one when the battery failure occurred. and you heard in the voice transcripts, you heard them talking about, did you see that go by the window? And then the battery failed. And then in the debriefing, he says, I only took photos of one anomaly, and that was during the D15 experiment. So you get corroboration on what's happening from those two fronts right there. Well, actually, from all three fronts, because you have the mission report talking about the D15 and some of the malfunctions that occurred during it. You have the voice transcripts, and then you also have the debriefing documents that explain it. Then when you take into effect the cover of the book, which shows the cloud overlay pattern matching exactly what you're looking at, it's nothing but overlay, but look for yourself. And kids, I don't have the camera operational so you can see what I'm showing you here, but I managed to send David a bunch of pictures that he can perhaps match some of these things for you to look
Well,
at.
we're showing some of the videos and pictures right now, and Ed,
Oh, cool.
can you see them on your screen?
No, absolutely not. All I see is a sign-in sheet. I can't even.
Okay, so I'm showing
Good.
it's like an animation of like multiple photos, and it's showing like a clock, or I guess a meter, and then
Yes,
there's
that's the D15 experiment. I know what. Yeah, I sent that to you. That's the D15 experiment right there. That clock. What that is it's the it's the mission control clock in Gemini elapsed time, and the clock reads exactly every time he hit the button. What the D15 experiment was this. Basically, the D15 experiment was called the night vision experiment. It was the first television camera to be put in space. It sat behind the Gemini capsule in the service module, and it was a long, possibly about 2.5 to 3 foot long cylinder that had a television camera with a lens on it. It was built by RCA. And what it did was it pointed down through the bottom of the spacecraft. And what they did was, as soon as they finished the 856-mile record high orbit that they had taken, they waited until they weren't going to use the thrusters anymore. And on the bottom of the spacecraft, there was a flap, and the flap opened. When they opened the flap, the camera pointed directly out into the mirror on the flap, and that's where that image comes from. It was taken from the mirror of the D15 camera. And what you see there is the night vision experiment. Basically, human beings' eyesight takes a long while to become night to full night vision to occur. And you have a typical orbit at 150 miles runs about 90 minutes. In that 90 minutes, 45 minutes are spent in daylight, 45 minutes are spent in darkness. It takes 20 full minutes for the human eye to adjust to night vision. And so every orbit, there would be 20 minutes when the astronauts would not be able to see well enough to do tracking experiments and surveillance. So they came up with a television camera that had night vision. They opened it up at night, and that was the image that the night vision camera took. Now, he was talking about, as I said, he only took one image of an anomaly in the debriefing, and that was what you see in that camera right there. You will see at the bottom of the image, he had a button in his hand that when he saw something he wanted to run the film by, he would press the button in. And what it did was, it was like looking at a little radar scope. I used to work in the Gulf of Mexico, and we would steer the boat at night by a radar screen that you would put your head down into it, and it would provide you with a radar image of everything that you needed to see to guide the boat. And that's exactly what this was. It was designed for the same purpose. But it was all an electromagnetic image on the radar screen. The only time that they took actual footage, which is what you're holding up there. That picture with the clock, that's the Accutron clock, too, that was developed just for NASA. The only time that he would press the button was when he saw something anomalous, and it would take the actual electromagnetic image that was playing constantly through the D15 camera, and it would record it on film. And I had the 16,000 frames of that film from the National Archives. That when I got it from the National Archives, they told me no one has ever requested it before. And I used Color Lab, which is one of the 3 National Archive registered producers of film for the National Archives. And I had the guy there. I said, I will pay you extra. Go out and get the highest definition you can. And he did. And it took quite a while for me to get that all developed. But what we have is some of the highest definition film of that experiment that's ever been there. Now, if you look in some of those pictures that you're seeing, there's a really interesting one that I love it. I think it's in the second book. It's called the Blue Saucer, and I do a photographic analysis of that, where we compare it to the lenticular craft seen in the um, um, lithograph. But I don't know if you can find that blue saucer to get there. That's another picture from the D15 experiment. There are multiple strange sightings in there, along with strange electromagnetic effects. As I said, there are 16,000 images, and I didn't have room, time, or the necessity to go through them all, but you will see them there. Now, kids, if you get on the back cover of all my books, and the front cover as well, I have made a distinct effort to put on the back covers as many photographs as I possibly can of these UFO phenomena, because I don't need you to buy the book. Yeah, I would love for you to buy the book. I'm not but I'm not here to make a fortune out of this. I have spent my time trying to solve a mystery. And part of the mystery is there on the back covers of those books. You do not have to buy the book. Go to Amazon.com. They show you the front cover, they show you the back cover. I have made a purposeful effort to get as many of these UFO pictures on the back cover. And I think you probably have it there too. Uh,
It,
yeah,
I'm looking at the GXI mission report,
yes.
and the way that they describe it is a spacecraft. So this was written in October 25th, 1965. So they had the language to describe it as a spacecraft. Could have they said uh, a shape, some type of, it looks kind of like a hamburger. Um, what made them think that it was a spacecraft? Did it have propulsion? Was it moving? I know a lot of the pictures show what it seems to be 5 or 6 dots that appear to be propulsion. That's what it says. Do you? How do they define and describe this object from your research?
Okay, I'm not sure which one you're looking at. The Gemini 11 mission report. You're looking at the cover of it, or
It's
see,
the Gemini
I
flight
can't.
history. It's from Gemini 6, man 2 days rendezvous canceled after failure of GATV, and it's on
Oh,
October
Gemini
25th.
6. Okay, that's the Gemini 6 mission. That's not the Gemini 11 mission, but I'm familiar with that. The Gemini 6 mission and the Gemini 7 mission. What happened was the whole purpose of these Gemini missions originally was to be able to rendezvous two craft together in orbit. That was necessary for the Apollo mission to be successful, because the Apollo mission would have to rendezvous with when the LEM lunar excursion module landed on the moon. It would have to take off from the moon, and then within one orbit, it had to rendezvous and hook up with the command module in order for the moonwalkers to get back in for the homeward voyage. Okay, so the
They're
whole
talking about
Gemini.
their own spacecraft.
Yes, right. Well, that was yeah. They're talking about the Agena craft, right? So what you have, these were rehearsals for that. So they shot up two. The Gemini missions shot two uh, uh, rockets for each mission. Okay, one of them carried the big Agena target vehicle, AGTV. That's what you're describing. The other one had the Gemini capsule, which they would practice rendezvousing with the GATV. On the Gemini 6 mission, you're absolutely right. The Gemini 6 mission, there's a picture called the Angry Alligator. And what it shows is it was supposed to, there was a covering on the target vehicle, which had a docking nose that they would practice docking to, but that it was covered by basically, it looked like a car hood, or actually, it looked like the snout of an alligator. It partially opened and did not disperse. So the Gemini mission could not get in and practice rendezvousing with the docking mechanism. So yes, and in fact, there was a large lawsuit there that NASA lost because they wouldn't let them sue um, uh, the manufacturer of that particular target vehicle, because his argument was, well, the photographs aren't good enough evidence, even though we know the photographs can pick up um, a, uh, a battleship on the surface of the Earth very easily. So yes, so what you're looking at there, those are the missions. The Gemini missions were two rockets for each mission, the astronauts in one rocket and then the target vehicle in the other. When that target vehicle for the Gemini 6 mission did not open up, they couldn't practice rendezvousing. So they actually had to turn it around and wait for the Gemini 7 mission to happen. Okay. So there were a lot of missteps
So
along the way.
in your research, what is the protocol if a new spaceship is seen or is coming towards them? How would the
Yeah.
U.S. NASA team or the different SpaceX groups are supposed to react?
Well, let me look right here and see if I can find the actual document for you that's in the back of book 3. It's see, explaining exactly what was expected of them.
And what is that?
Well, I'm looking for the document. Well, I won't bother. It's in the back of the book. It's by Macmillan Brockway Macmillan. Wrote a letter to Siemens, who was the head of NASA in Washington, telling them that when the astronauts cite something, they are not to describe it in particular. Of course, when they see something, they have to say that they see something, but they are directed by the National Reconnaissance Office through NASA to not report any details of what they see. It's in the book. It's in my epilogue center, right in the documents. Brockway Macmillan. The astronauts are explicitly ordered not to report the details of what they see. So that's exactly the protocol. I'm glad you asked that question. That's in the third book. You
Okay,
can
so let
read
me
it for
ask you
yourself.
this.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, so the people that were on the Gemini 11 saw this craft, came back to Earth. Wouldn't they be super traumatized and scared? And wouldn't one of them um, break the
The taboo? Yeah, well, some of them, you'll find that a lot of the astronauts have gone on record as saying that they believe in UFOs and stuff like that. But, let's take your own example, for instance. You saw two UFOs yourself, right? Were you terrified? Were you
no?
unable to function? Well, no, neither are they. Okay. These are trained observer men. They're men of steel. They're men of iron will. They look death in the face regularly. But let me tell you something that this comes from the Johnson Space Center, and you can look this up and read it for yourself. This is a true instance about Richard Underwood. Richard Underwood was the head of NASA's photography department. In World War II, he was a CB, and he was unloading ammunition crates on the South Sea Islands during the war with Japan out there. So that's where he started. When he got back with his GI Bill intact, he went ahead to several universities where he studied geology, and he also studied geophysical mapping. You will find that photographic analysts at that time were drawn from the National Park Service's Geological Survey, because the Geological Survey of the United States was taking its photographs of its forest from planes, and then they would be able to map and analyze from those photographs for the National Geological Survey. Well, that was a very valuable skill, and that's what he was trained as. And he went ahead and was recalled by the Navy to do exactly that, photo analysis. In fact, you can read right here. It's called Richard Underwood, go to Johnson Space Center, Oral Histories, okay? The year 2000 was when Richard Underwood's oral history was done. And there's only one interview. It's about 42 pages of a document. It's an oral interview before these guys died. In '96, they decided, Jesus, all the guys who started the space program are dying and we're losing all this valuable information. So in 96, they started the oral histories. And here's what Underwood says on page 2 of his oral history. He speaks specifically about what he was doing. He was working in Honduras, okay? And he was working on planes like the U-2 and the B-29, which were, in his own words, a great surveillance aircraft. And he says, while there, I met my wife, who was a Honduran national. And when I met her and fell in love, I married her. Now, this is on page 2 of that oral history. You can go there. Don't believe me, okay? And this is as close to verbatim as I can give you right now. This is verbatim what he said. When the general I was working for heard that I had married my Honduran wife, he called me into his office, and this, I'll put quotes around this. You can read it, it's in there. I should take you out and have you shot right now without a trial. Johnson Space Center Oral Histories, Richard Underwood, head of the photographic department. There's all kinds of, he explains everything in there. He also says in there that nobody has ever seen more than a third generation image because he was the guy in charge. And I'm going to read you the documents here in just a minute that explain exactly how the United States government didn't, and NASA did not know that they didn't have original photographs. It was only the very elite of the government, from the National Reconnaissance Office to some members of the CIA. It was, and I've got the actual documents. I'll read to you. They picked up the actual photographs from the spaceship on the deck of the aircraft carrier that recovered the spaceships. Now, just like today, they landed in the water, they pulled them up on the aircraft carrier, okay? I'm going to read you the memos. But did you hear what I said about Richard Underwood? Did you hear what the general told him? Read it for yourself. Did you
The
hear me?
general
You,
racist? Like, what was his problem?
no, it wasn't. It was his national security. He was working on YouTube, as he goes on to tell you. I was taken off the YouTube projects, and I was relegated back to the B-29s. On the B-29s, in fact, I flew so many hours that I lost my hearing in my right ear and can no longer hear. So it wasn't a matter of racism. It was a matter of national security clearances that he had. He had such high clearances that they absolutely would not take a risk of him being married to a foreign national, not for purposes of racism, but for a security threat. And they took him off the U2s. You can read it yourself, and the explanations in there. Those 40 pages are very, very enlightening. He's the man who explains also that almost nobody has ever seen more than a third generation film. He tells you things that are verified in some of these other documents that I read to you here, such as most people think that the NASA film that came out of those cameras was just regular film. It was not. The Soviet Union was using regular film. But what Richard Underwood and his engineers had developed was a special film. The film that came out of those cameras was no thicker than saran wrap. So if you want to know if you're looking at a real Gemini or real space image, negative, it's the thickness of saran wrap. If it's not that thickness, then it is a copy. And every time you make a generational copy, you can doctor what's on the negative. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay, so last question. Why was this lady, the one that you were able to buy her portfolio, so irresponsible to just keep the photos around and then her family or whomever sell them in an auction? Wouldn't she like bury them or keep them in a safe? Why would she just keep them around with all the other pictures if it has an alien ship on it?
Well, basically, it's an unclassified document. I'll explain that to you a little bit later. But you have to understand who Emily Ertl was and what happened with her circumstances. Scott Simpkinson started working for NACA, the National Aeronautics Civilian Authority, In World War II during 1943 when he graduated from college. Emily Ertl started 2 years later in 1945 as a secretary, working at Lewis Field, which was Lewis Field Army Air Force Research Center. Okay, there was no NASA at that time. So those guys worked together all those years. Scott had married early and he'd had a disabled young daughter, and they lived up in Cleveland by Lewis Field. Now, um, obviously, when they called him to go down to um, Cape Canaveral and to open Cape Canaveral up for NASA, his wife did not want to accompany him there. And so he ended up becoming the life partner of Emily Ertl. They never married, but things were different back then. Whether it was because he was a devout Catholic and would no longer be able to take communion if he um, uh, divorced, or whether it was just a matter of perhaps insurance for his disabled daughter. I don't know. But they never married, but they lived together until his death in 1996. She's recognized in the New York Times. And of course, in the Times back then, you couldn't say that they were lovers. You had to say lifelong friend. So she was his lifelong friend as expressed in the New York Times. What she did do, I have in the binders here, I have Christmas cards from the astronauts. Scott was very much into creating the first day covers where the astronauts would sign the cover before they went into space. And if they died in the space mission, then their wife and family would have the signed cover, which were worth lots of money because no insurance company would insure the astronauts. They were making $11 or $12 a day for a flight. This was supposed to be a civilian agency. There's so many things in these archives that I have that show everybody says, well, say hi to Emily for me. But here's what Emily did. Scott had offices in McDonnell Douglas. Scott also had offices in Mission Control in Houston, and Scott had offices in Cape Canaveral, right? Scott was the chief engineer for Mission Control, and he had more archives in each office. She was the secretary who took control. She was the one who combined all of NASA's images. She had a very high clearance too. So
Ed, I just found the part where he discusses UFOs on that Johnson Space Central History Project.
yes,
So this is what it says. Underwood. Yes, things changed. Yes, there was a lot of significant things that would change on Earth that we wanted pictures of and to re-photograph. We always gave them some training. If you see anything you don't understand, take a picture of it.
yes,
Charles Pete Conrad Jr. photographed this famed UFO. We thought it was a defect in the film. It was in 3 photographs. It was during the debriefing afterwards that Pete said, "What do you think of that UFO?" I said, "What UFO?" He said, "Well, I took 3 pictures on it, this one roll." I said, "Gee, I thought you were taking pictures of the S-band antenna on the Agena and they were out of focus." It was a very definitive vehicle, not an artifact of any kind. It was a machine that was built by some humans somewhere in time. We couldn't figure it out. We had no idea what it was or anything. We went on for years. Every time I roll the roll from Gemini 11, I think, what the devil is that? We have no idea what it is because we hadn't anything that we launched that looked like that. So maybe there are UFOs or something.
yes, that was the very first mission. And if you go on, you'll see where he says later on when the Russians released their ephemera, and I forget what the magazine was. He says later on we learned that it was the proton missile being from the Russian space launch. That's the very first Gemini 11 UFO. And Scott Simpkinson there, or not Scott Simpkinson, but Richard Underwood is the one who debunks it, but he doesn't debunk it except in the article you're reading right there in the year 2000. There was the Conrad report is replete with the instances of that. There was a guy who was Maccabee. That's who it was. There was a guy named Maccabee, and you go to Black Vault and look up Maccabee. Maccabee was I believe he was a high school physics teacher, but he was also a photography expert. And he looked at those images, and there are 3 of them, and you can see those images, and they're actually in the actual NASA photos. I forget, S-66, something like that. But they actually are very recognizable. Maccabee went ahead, he magnified them, and he did it. Now, in the Conrad report, when it comes time, in the Conrad report, NORAD, North American Defense Systems, said initially and explained it away and said, this is the proton rocket from the Russians that they were photographing. And you can tell when you look at Maccabee's instructions and you compare it with the proton rocket, the Russians had a distinctive lower bell to their spacecraft. In other words, they didn't have the high technology metals that the United States had for its nozzles, high temperature nozzles. So they used smaller nozzles, but they used multiple a number of engines, and that's why they were required to have that longer or wider base at the proton rocket, and it's bell shaped at the bottom. That's basically what it is.
Okay. Okay.
So
And
Maccabee
so
made a whole article about that, and Maccabee went for years without that. But if you read a little further down there, you will see where Underwood says here, and that's in 2000. So up until then, nobody knew that that was actually that. The problem was Maccabee. Here's what Maccabee said. He said it can't be. It can't be the proton rocket because NORAD says the proton rocket is 246 miles away. And I can prove definitively that you would not be able to see that in the photograph if it was 246 miles away. Proof. And he's absolutely right. And then Underwood comes in and says in 2000, later on, the Russian ephemera showed it was only 4 miles away.
Ed, have you heard about the latest idea that there's going to be a psyop or false flag alien invasion that some people are brewing to again try to distract people? And what about disclosure? A lot of UFO enthusiasts feel that there's some disclosure that is coming, and there's already been a lot of disclosure by having reputable military personnel and others, pilots and people like that, speaking freely about their sightings. Do you think there's anything coming up that we should be looking out for?
Well, like the president just said, he's just ordered a bunch of releases. You have to understand that a lot of the evidence that's being released and being compiled now, okay, has the same purpose for not being released as it did back then. If you read certain books, like I recommend The Day After Roswell. Have you ever read The Day After Roswell by, oh gee, what was his name? But he was the guy who was advisor to the president, and he's the man who said that he had um, the file cabinets. He worked in the Pentagon. His high range is unbelievable. Advisor to the president's technical advisor. He's the one who said he had a filing cabinet of debris from Roswell, that he was the man who was in charge of taking it to various companies such as Bell Laboratories, et cetera, and having them back engineer from the debris that he had in his filing cabinet that was his responsibility to have back engineered. And it's called The Day After Roswell. And he will explain to you the backbiting. Here's what he had to do, okay? He was trying to run a secretive operation too. But at the same time, the CIA was running their operation, the Air Force was running their operation. Everybody has their own operation that they're running, and they guard the budgets for those things very jealously. And they guard them very seriously too. Like the general who told Underwood, I should take you out and have you shot without a trial right now. This is in the book from Robert Corso, that's our Major Corso, in The Day After Roswell. He was taking parts out to be, I believe it was Bell Laboratories or something. He's the one, according to him, what is it, optical cables that we use nowadays. That was one of the things that he has. He says that the eyelid of the alien that they had recovered from Roswell, the eyelid was what was able to create the very first night scope, night vision, which I remember well from the Vietnam War era, which was the first time that you could see in the dark on top of your M16 rifle to shoot. All of these things, the microchip, he said the microchip was back engineered. That was something that he was responsible for too. He took these things out. In fact, he was in charge of something called the Alien Technology Division. Ha ha ha. How funny, huh? Well, they did have alien technology. One of the things that he had to do was he went down to Brazil and he procured the Brazilians had developed a machine gun that was an exceptional quality instrument. He went down, procured one secretly, brought it back up, and had them back engineer it. That was alien technology. Alien meaning alien nations, okay? Little did he know later on that he would get the cabinet and be responsible for alien technologies too, where he had back engineering done. But
Okay.
this is what he did. Okay, you want to ask a question? Let me just finish. I'm sorry I'm so wordy, but this is just the seriousness of the matter. You're asking why these things uh, happen. It's because there is animosity between the departments. Right now, there are departments that do not want any information coming out. There's all kinds of reasons, whether it might be that the corporations that did these back engineerings have made millions and millions of dollars from back engineering these things, such as the Star Scope M16 rifle, made a fantastic wealth on that. A fiber optic cable that came from Richard Corso too. Those companies would be responsible for the profits that they made should they be proven to come from the U.S. archives. Okay, so that's one forward there. But then you've got the
Okay.
budgets and the black budgets and the effort. Here's what happened to Corso. Corso went out. He was being followed. He was taking alien technology to have it back engineered. He knew he was being followed by a CIA operative. The next day, he came back in and he went in the Pentagon. And this is in his book. He says, I went to the Pentagon. I went to the office of the CIA director. I took my service revolver out. I put it on top of his desk. And I said, and he said, if I'm followed one more time, you will not have him.
Okay.
These
So
guys aren't messing around. This is the seriousness of it. Yeah, so this is the kind of battles that are going on in all the divisions of the country. Everything's compartmentalized and everyone is very, very jealous of their budgets and everyone's very protective of their constituents.
So to wrap it up, do you think SpaceX has something to do with having some type of defense system in space, just in case the aliens get upset or they want to cause some trouble?
Well, I'm not gonna go into those hypotheticals right now. Since we're getting to the end right now, I'm going to read you three documents. I sent you these three documents, okay? This is exactly what you'll find in the third book. This I have got dozens and dozens and dozens of top secret documents explaining the whole process from A to Z. The three books are well over 1,000 pages. I've got all kinds of photographs from all over. I've got the actual quotes from all these areas, but these are the three right now. And here's what is going to be a news break for you right now that will be coming out very shortly. And this is what it is. Remember, everybody has been searching all the UFO images, pictures from NASA, right? They've been searching the pictures and images for UFOs, and some of them see them, like that, the Conrad, or like the document you saw with the proton rocket. That's actually in there. You can see that, okay? But every time they look at them, they ask NASA, "Do you have them?" And they say, "No, we don't have any other images," and they don't. NASA is not lying because only the top brass knew these three documents that I'm going to give to you now. The first one comes from the National Reconnaissance Office, created in 1960, was never even recognized until 1992. For 32 years, this guy was running the National Reconnaissance Office. And here is the first of three documents. Now, remember, um, everybody thought that NASA was in control of their photos, right? Guess what? That's what's coming out here. This is the proof. NASA was not in control of their photos. The photos were controlled outside of NASA, and even the people at NASA didn't know it, except for the very top people like Chief Engineer Simpkinson, who is a memo in here explaining it, and also Siemens in Washington. Only the very top people knew what's happening. This is a memo. August 9th, 1965, Lieutenant Colonel Quiggins from the law office. It says here, Dear Bob, On several occasions, I have expressed my concern regarding possible compromise of the National Satellite Reconnaissance Program by inadvertent or uncontrolled disclosure of photography acquired by non-NRF programs. In addition to the problems acquired by problems associated with security compromise, there is equally important matter of the adverse effects such a disclosure would have on our political relationships with other nations. I note a photograph of Cape Kennedy published in the July 9th, 1965 issue of NASA Space News Roundup. This photograph was taken on the Gemini XI flight by a 70mm camera as part of the NASA flight experiments. While this particular photograph has minor intelligence or political significance, a similar photograph of certain domestic and most foreign locations could create serious problems. In reviewing the Department of Defense-sponsored experiment to be conducted during the Gemini 5 flight, I find that photography to be accomplished on a number of targeted objectives in this country and abroad. The camera equipment to be used is the Zeiss Contrix 50-inch focal length quarter lens, has the potential of producing photography of exceptional quality. In addition to the Department of Defense-sponsored photographic experiments, I understand that NASA also plans to photograph prearranged and random targets. I would expect the great majority of photographs acquired during the Great Gemini series flight to be unclassified and suitable for public release. However, I consider it to our mutual benefit to take action now to preclude any problems of setting up procedures for reviewing all photographs prior to public release. Under present procedures, all Gemini acquired photography, both NASA and Department of Defense sponsored, is processed at the Manned Spacecraft Center Photographic Laboratory in Houston. I understand that the decision regarding propriety of public release of NASA-sponsored photography has been delegated to the Mission Control. The Department of Defense recently delegated a similar authority after release of Department of Defense-sponsored photograph experiments to the DoD Public Affairs Representative in Houston. In retrospect, I question whether any of these delegations is appropriate to matters of potential national and international concern. The proper review of aerial photographs is a highly technical and complex process. The complexity of this function is directly related, of course, to the availability of source material, maps, collateral data, etc., as well as the existence or absence of identifiable features on the photography. In the Washington area, the National Photographic Interpretive Center has a unique capability for both quality processing and interpretation of aerial photographs. I believe it would be to our mutual benefit to transfer responsibility for processing, orientation, and interpretation of future Gemini or similar series photographs from Mission Control to the National Photographic Interpretive Center. Such actions will provide processing service to the highest standards, as well as precise definition of the coverage and location of each photograph. Upon completion, I propose that you and I review the photography in conjunction with Mr. Lundahl, director of the NPIC, to determine the appropriateness for release. I have been assured by Mr. Lundahl that his agency can perform this function on a priority basis. I believe the great majority of NASA and DoD photographs should present no problem. Since you will probably wish to avoid any arrangement which incurs the involvement of NASA to a classified endeavor, I recommend the procedure for high-speed delivery of exposed NASA and DoD film from the aircraft carrier to NPIC be arranged in a manner which will preclude contact with or reference to either the National Reconnaissance Office or the National Photographic Interpretive Center by NASA personnel or DoD personnel on duty with NASA who are not properly cleared for the NSF progress. As a suggestion, it may be feasible for Colonel Sweet of your security staff to arrange pickup and delivery of the film. I would make arrangements for release of the DoD material to him or his representative on the carrier. I invite your comments on this proposal, and it's signed Brock McMillan, Director of the National Reconnaissance Office. This is a top secret document. You can see it's classified on top secret document. What he's saying in general respect right there has to do with the fact you have to understand that when the space program started and these missions were flying over top of all the nations, it wasn't just the Soviet Union that was upset. It was our allies, Great Britain, France, Germany, all the world powers. Now we're aware that they could be reconnaissance pictures taken of them from space. Now, there were no international treaties. This was a serious problem. You can see in the National Security AM 156 where the president himself authorizes it, saying we can't let people know what we're doing. We don't have treaties to regulate this. So basically, that's the suggestion. Now, this is where Mr. Simpkinson comes in, who would receive. How come you want to know? How come Simpkinson would be in line to receive that lithograph showing the UFO? Why would he be one of the ones chosen? And here is a place, another top secret document from the same cache of 70 pages. 1700, Colonel McKee received a call indicating that Mr. Simpkinson was quite upset after having learned that all the film was not turned over to Mr. Gammon the night before. Colonel McKee asked Mr. Simpkinson in to meet with him and me. This gent was quite upset, wholly the result of being completely misinformed. Quieting his concern took quite some doing. He left satisfied and apologetic. What you have right here is where they have to express to Scott Simpkinson why he did not get all the film back. In other words, the NPIC did not return all the film. Here's exactly the last document that I will read to you, and this is a great one. And this is one that should make headlines, if for nothing else, the heroic nature of a guy like the astronaut in charge of Gemini 5, Gordon Cooper. And it's another top secret document, and it states as follows. Following the review, Gordon Cooper mentioned to me that he had called Dr. Siemens earlier in the week to express his concern about the handling of NASA film. He stated that he was damned unhappy with the arrangements, and had he known that Colonel Sweet was picking up all the film, he would have had a fist fight on his hands aboard the carrier, because he damn sure wouldn't have taken the NASA film. He stated further that this was supposed to be a national program and should be handled in that fashion. He stated that he was speaking as a NASA man. He indicated that they would not hear the end of this. He indicated that he intended personally to discuss this mess with some very high-level people, and that he would start with General McConnell. He indicated that it was a damn shame what the processors had done to the film, ruining a roll and a half, cutting it, handling it sloppily, not processing it correctly, and as a result, completely destroying the color. He stated the Mission Control Lab had been completely prepared to do a professional job, and that someone had talked NASA into allowing the film to be processed by completely incapable people. At this point, he asked if Wright Patterson had processed the film. I stated that they had not. He didn't press the question further. He commented further that the whole mission control was upset about this mess, and that it would, without a doubt, result in a serious rift between the Air Force and NASA. He did say Air Force. So, gentlemen, take what you want from these top secret documents. They're in the book. Many, many more. Read for yourself. Read exactly what I have discovered. Don't take my word for it. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to make my opinions known. It's not necessary. My job as a historian is to provide you with documents to make your own decisions. So I appreciate the opportunity to get some of these things expressed to you. I have hours and hours of information in these books. If you're interested, look.
Please tell the audience how to get a hold of your books, and do you have a website where they can also see your information?
Well, kids, best way to do it is just go on Google artificial AI, type in the words Simpkinson. Now, I love Bart Simpson cartoons. Do you guys like them too? I love Simpson. Bart Simpson's great, but the name is Simpkinson, Simpkinson. Just go to AI, type in Simpkinson CIA UFO. And that ought to bring up a whole plethora of information, of websites, of podcasts that have been done, of information that's been recorded. And you will find basically the best book is this latest one, which contains the documents. The Simpkinson NASA UFO, or go to Amazon.com and type in the Simpkinson NASA UFO CIA briefing document. That will bring all those documents that I read to you. Guys, those are blockbuster documents. The other two books are Hidden Under Our Nose. That contains information of comparisons of the 16,000 frames of D15 film, some of which are the pictures I'm sure David has showed to you, the one in particular on the cover of the book. And then the first one and the original one, which has 150, the finest collection of the earliest NASA photos ever. I'm glad I found that archive and preserved it in this book. Those 150 pictures won't be matched. Richard Haynes from NARCAP, who is famous for starting NARCAP, was kind enough to allow me to use, I think it's like a 40-page report that he did on a Chilean UFO that resembles the Simpkinson UFO. And he wrote and said he was so glad that someone recorded this wonderful archive of photos. The photographs are beautiful. The 5 scientific reports in the back can be studied at your leisure. The mission control, the voice transcripts, the debriefings, the analysis by many of the people who've been helpful to me in recording some of this information are all in there. But it's a wonderful coffee table book. I dare say there will never be a more complete collection of the earliest Mercury mission photographs than are in this book. So that's something that will historically be wonderful for your kids to get an idea of what the times were like back then. Go to Amazon, look all 3 of those books up. You don't have to buy them, okay, kids? I've done my best to get pictures on the front that are actual pictures, not in they're actual NASA pictures, okay? On the front, on the back cover, look at that too. I put as many as I could in the limited time and capabilities that I have. And I want you to just look. You don't have to buy the book. Be amazed. Do the AI search. Simpkinson, NASA UFO CIA briefing document. It will bring a lot of videos up, and I think you're going to hear more, specifically with that blockbuster news that you've just heard. Those 3 memos right there more or less prove what nobody knew before. NASA did not have control of its own photographs. And you heard 3 of the actual documents that cannot more explicitly point that out. Taken from the aircraft carrier deck, and not all of them returned. So, David, you're very kind. And you guys are all kind out there, too. Trust me, I'm amazed as anything. It's changed my life. When I started the investigation, it's because I'm a rare book and document dealer, and I make my living solving puzzles. If I buy a rare book and I can't prove that it's the genuine document, then I can't sell it, and I go out of business. So this was right in my purveyance. So when I saw this, I had to follow through on it. And believe me, now with the completion of this 3rd book, without a doubt, my life has changed, because I know so much more now than I was able to express to you today. And I really look at that image of the lithograph, and in my heart, I now believe that I have determined the truth. On top of that, within the next 2 months, I expect another 4 Freedom of Information Act requests that I put to 4 of the agencies where the final records might well rely. I've heard from 3 of them already. I used the 1969 NPIC handbook to finally come up with the terminology needed to do these searches. These FOIA document searches are very complex, but because I have found the 1969 handbook. I knew the exact terms to look for, and they've already told me I've accrued $1,200 worth of information. So kids, stay tuned, but do yourself a favor. My life's changed, okay? My life's changed. Started out just my solving a puzzle, but now with those documents, I think you can see there's a strong argument to be made that this is reality.
Well, we would love for you to come back and give us an update.
I'd love to. I'd love the chance. You've been very kind.
Yes. So we would like to thank you for your time, and I hope that people will get a hold of your information and check it out for themselves and make up their own mind. Thank you so much.
Exactly. Thank you, David. What a pleasure, everybody. Take care of yourselves. It's a
Thank you.
wonderful life.